Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. The Treasury Department promising to go after alleged welfare fraud in Minnesota. Secretary Scott Bessent says some of the funds may have already been transferred to Africa. The Department of Justice is looking into a voter registration vouching system in Minnesota. The Department of Homeland Security and Citizenship and Immigration Services are also examining thousands of refugee claims. U.S. forces seize another oil tanker in the Caribbean. The seizure comes as the Trump administration works to control Venezuelan oil exports. President Trump with three major announcements on Venezuela. This coming as top oil executives are about to meet President Trump and administration officials at the White House. The DHS says the two people shot by a Border Patrol officer in Portland are associated with the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. According to DHS, both suspects entered the U.S. illegally under the Biden administration. U.S. payrolls increased less than expected in December. The economy added 50,000 new jobs last month. We have analysis on that.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent promising to crack down on welfare fraud in Minnesota. In a press conference in Minneapolis today, Bessent said the Treasury Department is focusing on funds that may have been transferred overseas.
At Treasury, we are thoroughly investigating the fraud, including funds sent to Somalia through money service businesses which provide financial services outside of a formal bank. These funds could have potentially been diverted to the terrorist organization Al-Shabaab. We have traced where the money went and are examining it.
The Treasury Secretary said his department is investigating financial institutions to make sure they are complying with anti-money laundering laws. His agency has followed the money and identified the money service businesses that have made transferred taxpayer funds overseas. Bessent said the Minnesota protocols will serve as a launching pad for investigations into other states.
We are going to leave no stone unturned, whether it was fraudulent real estate, whether it is money that has been wired overseas. We will be tracking it to the Middle East and East Africa. This is why Treasury is involved. This is what we do. We track, we follow the money, and we intend to follow it as much as we can, prosecute the individuals no matter where they are, whether they are in the Minnesota government or they are sitting in East Africa. We will find them.
The Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, known as FinCEN, is working with the IRS on this matter. The Treasury is providing training to Minnesota law enforcement on how to utilize financial data. The IRS will also launch a task force to investigate any fraud and abuse involving pandemic-era tax incentives and misuse of 501c3 tax-exempt status. The Treasury Secretary said the Trump administration is committed to putting an end to welfare fraud. The Trump administration is being sued by 5 Democrat-led states. A coalition comprised of California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York is asking a court to halt a funding freeze from the White House. Officials in the 5 states say the move is unconstitutional and violates law and regulations linked to federal aid programs. The lawsuit is being led by New York Attorney General Letitia James, who says the administration has not given, quote, any legitimate justification for stopping the funds. The Trump administration has cited concerns about fraud in the programs designed to help low-income families and their children. The Department of Justice is looking into a voter registration vouching system in Minnesota. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Harmeet Dillon says the department is investigating an apparent conflict with federal law.
What you have in Minnesota, which as we know is a fraud and corruption-riddled state now, is a system where any one registered voter can vouch for 8 people and say that I know that Bob and Jose and Jimmy and whoever and my neighbors, they all live in my neighborhood and they're residents of this district, so you should register them. But even worse, a single person who's a worker at a residential facility, like a home, like care for elderly or disabled, they can register the entire facility.
Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security and Citizenship and Immigration Services are examining thousands of refugee claims in Minnesota, dubbed Operation Paris. The investigation will focus on more than 5,000 refugees who have not yet been given lawful permanent resident status. A previous investigation dubbed Operation Twin Shield recently uncovered widespread immigration fraud in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. A newly established vetting center will conduct background checks, interviews, and reviews of refugee claims. Tensions in Minneapolis remain high following the ICE shooting on Wednesday. Protests are now also spreading into the nation's capital. A federal agent shot and killed a woman after she drove her car into him. The Trump administration says she weaponized her vehicle to attack officers, calling it an act of domestic terrorism. According to new numbers from Homeland Security, vehicular attacks on ICE agents are up by over 3,000%. The numbers compare the Trump administration's 2025 term to President Biden's 2024 term. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey is calling on the federal government to let state authorities participate in the investigation of the shooting. House Speaker Mike Johnson is weighing in as well, saying a full investigation will take place.
In Minneapolis, when a tragedy strikes, there is one word that summarizes what is most important, and that word is integrity. This is not the time to bend the rules. This is a time to follow the law. This is not a time to hide from the facts. This is a time to embrace them, making sure that we're pushing for transparency every step of the way.
We all understand there has to be a full investigation. That's the appropriate thing. That will happen. But I think you'll verify that on the video. It appears to us that the officer involved was operating in self-defense. He made a snap judgment, as they do. He had been drugged behind a vehicle already, we now know, this particular officer, and he felt that his life and the life of his fellow officers and potentially bystanders was in danger. And so we'll have to see.
Hundreds of people marched through the streets of Minneapolis last night near the site of the shooting. Attacks on ICE agents have already been increasing in recent months. Hostility is now growing even further after Wednesday's incident. Protesters also marched to the White House last night. Similar to the situation in Minnesota, protesters in Washington are calling on ICE agents to leave the city. Governor Tim Walz is authorizing the Minnesota National Guard to support local law enforcement. According to a statement yesterday, the troops will be staged and ready out of an abundance of caution and in coordination with local officials. The statement says the goal is to help maintain peace, ensure public safety, and allow for peaceful demonstrations. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security says the two people shot by a Border Patrol officer in Portland are associated with the Venezuelan gang Trendy Argua. DHS spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin told Fox News that the shooting was justified.
Our law enforcement officers pulled them over as they were approaching the vehicle. When the subjects realized who our law enforcement were, they pulled forward, attempting to hit our law enforcement. And that's when our agent, he again followed his training and fired defensive shots.
According to DHS, both suspects entered the U.S. illegally under the Biden administration. Both were released into the country. DHS said the male suspect had been arrested for driving under the influence and unauthorized use of a vehicle. He had already been subject to a final order of removal. The department said the female suspect was part of a Trendy Argua prostitution ring. DHS added that she was involved in a prior shooting in Portland. The department said the two suspects are not married, despite earlier reports. Meanwhile, Oregon's Attorney General announced an investigation into the shooting. And after the altercation last night, the Portland Police Bureau says 6 people were arrested near an ICE facility. Those arrested range in age from 24 to 48. Most are from the greater Portland area. All 6 were booked on suspicion of second-degree disorderly conduct. Police say they asked protesters to move to the sidewalk and stop blocking traffic. That request was made around 9 p.m. local time. Tensions ratchet up in Iran. Supreme Leader Anatoly Ali Khamenei accused President Trump of having hands stained with blood of Iranians. Iranian state television showed footage of people shouting, "Death to America." State media later repeatedly referred to demonstrators as terrorists. The harsh language could be setting the stage for a violent suppression like those followed other nationwide protests in recent years. NTD's Jason Perry has the Middle East update.
Protesters in Iran on Thursday gathered around an Iranian flag and then began tearing it up. Protests were held across Iran, including in the capital, after the country's exiled crown prince, Reza Pahlavi, called for mass demonstrations on Thursday and Friday. And he said based on their response, he'll announce the next call to action. However, internet and telephone lines in Iran were cut out immediately after the protests began. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency said at least 41 people have been killed during the demonstrations, while more than 2,000 others have been detained. And President Trump has threatened U.S. intervention if Iran shoots peaceful protesters. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on Thursday addressed the nationwide protests. An interpreter then translated his words into Arabic.
We are ready for any situation. We do not want war, but we are ready for it. We are also ready for negotiations, but negotiations that are based on mutual interests and respect.
Jason Perry, NTD News.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent putting a few things into motion, like investigating money services businesses in Minnesota and announcing an upcoming IRS fraud task force. The department is also targeting money laundering. To discuss Minnesota fraud, the ICE shooting in Portland, and the protests in Iran, joining us is Gerard Filitti, Senior Counsel at the Lawfare Project, political strategist and Middle East affairs analyst. Gerard, good afternoon. I just want to start off by asking this. What do you think is at the root of this problem, that there's this level of fraud in Minnesota?
Well, I think the level of this fraud is unprecedented, and one of the reasons why it's this large is it simply has not been examined. This is something that's happened within a more isolated community, using different communications methods, using different tactics to send money, to funnel money out of the state system. So this has not been so easy to catch. And as we've seen from a lot of investigative reporting, they actually do set up some sort of business. There actually is some sort of physical presence for some of these operations that your viewers are seeing on the screen right now. So that makes it more difficult for fraud to be detected, because it's not just a PO box, there's a physical presence and people who are there receiving the checks.
Vice President Vance yesterday announced the creation of a new Assistant Attorney General position, to help investigate billions of dollars in fraud affecting the federal government. How much of an impact do you think this will have?
I think it will have a huge impact. Up until this point, fraud has been treated as a one-off. We've had task forces over the years that have looked at different aspects of fraud and abuse. We've seen fraud and abuse come up in the context of DOGE as well at the beginning of President Trump's second term. But now having an Assistant Attorney General dedicated to this shows that the government is committing resources to address this as a systemic problem. This is a whole-of-the-government approach that will be more efficient going forward in detecting and prosecuting these cases so that we see less of it. So this is not just a one-off task force to address one problem. This is being set up as a way to address a systemic problem of fraud that's affecting many parts of the government.
Okay, Gerard, now about the protests. Just yesterday, 2 people were shot by an immigration agent in Portland. DHS says they are illegal aliens connected to Tren de Aragua. So can you tell us more about Tren de Aragua members and the kind of risks U.S. agents are working under to capture them?
Well, Tren de Aragua is identified and labeled as a terrorist group, as a narco-terrorist organization. So this is a level of federal designation that speaks to their dangerousness. This is not just a gang. This is not just drug dealers or thugs. This is organized crime that's directed by foreign interests. So the members of this organization, the members are really narco-terrorists who pose a significant danger to national security, to civilians, and to law enforcement. We're not talking about drug dealers. We're talking about people who have guns, people who are armed, and people who are here to do significant damage. So when we have these law enforcement encounters, unfortunately, these are not people who are just here illegally. These are people who are here committing crime.
So FBI Director Kash Patel said the Bureau is investigating anti-immigration enforcement protests and the review includes organizers, protesters, funding sources. He said those campaigns may be driving illicit activities. Do you see any patterns when it comes to the tactics that are being used by protest groups?
We're absolutely seeing patterns. We're seeing very aggressive protesters. What we're not seeing are peaceful demonstrations where people are marching to a public square to be heard. These are protesters who are actually physically encountering law enforcement officers, trying to block their cars, trying to prevent them physically from gaining access to buildings or to perform their law enforcement functions. And this is organized. This is not just in one occasion or one location. We have people who are designating themselves as observers or as leaders who are there to identify the law enforcement personnel and publish their location, to track how they're operating. This is highly sophisticated and not just something done by random people who are dissatisfied with a government policy. So this level of organization is funded and it's directed. And what the government is saying now is that it needs to find out who is organizing this to start cracking down so that we don't have these violent confrontations that lead to tragedy.
Okay, you said these protests largely are not peaceful. So when do protests become an impediment to law enforcement operations and endanger public safety?
They become an impediment the moment you go from peacefully saying what you want to grabbing police officers, throwing rocks, throwing firebombs, targeting officers with violence, getting in their way to prevent them from leaving or preventing them from entering something. That's no longer a peaceful First Amendment verbal protest. That's conduct. That becomes conduct that's illegal. So you're allowed in this country to say that you don't want police in your neighborhood or you don't want ICE in your neighborhood, but you cannot block their cars or try to push them away from buildings because that becomes a crime. That's the conduct that becomes a crime. And unfortunately, what we're seeing and what we're seeing more often is that we're not just seeing peaceful protesters like you see on your screen, people holding signs, but we're seeing people engaged in physically confronting law enforcement. And that's dangerous. It leads to escalations where violence has occurred and people have lost their lives.
Now, Gerard, about the protests in Iran, what is the significance of these protests? Is what's happening now different?
These are perhaps the most significant protests we have seen in Iran in the last 46 years of the Ayatollah's regime that have the potential for actually bringing down the current government. Unlike previous protests, which were targeted by students or by people who are dissatisfied with a specific government policy, we see people now mobilizing on the streets from all walks of life: merchants, professors, teachers, students, pensioners. Everyone is gathering on the streets to protest the conditions that the government has resulted in Iranian economy, in Iranian people suffering under this regime. And what we're seeing now is not a demand for a structural change. We're seeing a demand targeting that the entire government go. So this is the most significant set of protests that we've seen in the last 46 years.
Okay, just finally, what do you make of President Trump's threat of involvement if the Iranian regime kills any protesters? And this is, of course, against the backdrop of what the administration just did in Venezuela.
I think it's a very powerful threat that's reverberating strongly within the Iranian government. I think that President Trump is looking to sustain and to uphold human rights values in Iran. So the message is to the Ayatollah regime, to the Islamist Republic, to not use violence against the people, the civilians, to keep the soldiers, their enforcement mechanism, their secret police on their base. I think President Trump is likely, if anything, to strike military targets if he sees tanks rolling to suppress the people. If he sees the military being used to target civilians, President Trump may order directed strikes against these military facilities, not boots on the ground, not involvement in Iran, but eliminating assets that the regime is using to oppress people. And that would be a very powerful incentive for the people of Iran to finally get their freedom.
Okay, Gerard, very insightful comments today. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Allegations the Chinese Communist Party is backing leftist protests here in America. The issue is back in the spotlight as ICE agents, or rather anti-ICE protests and protests supporting Venezuela's ousted dictator Nicolas Maduro start up again. A House committee this week approved a subpoena for a pro-Beijing billionaire who is suspected of bankrolling the organized protests. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
Anti-ICE protests starting up again in Minnesota, and protests opposing the capture of communist dictator Nicolas Maduro popped up in New York City.
We saw it in the protests that were pro-Maduro, supposedly, where everyone showed up with the exact same protest sign, paid for by individuals largely based out of China. There's a real concern here that we have a vivid fifth column approaching on U.S. shores that are trying to advance a pro-Beijing agenda.
The groups behind these protests, like the Party for Socialism and Liberation, are suspected to be a socialist network bankrolled by a China-based billionaire named Nelval Roy Singham.
But when those things happen, and they're sensitive and they try to support, quite frankly, our enemies, and China is not a friend of the U.S., then my guess is there's probably some illegal activity.
Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna described Singham as the funding arm of the CCP.
He is definitely someone that is anti-American in ideology, and regardless of where you might stand, even on topics like Israel versus Palestine, is funding certain groups that actually sow discord in this country with no efforts to actually resolve the issues, only to get us to fight one another.
Congresswoman Luna has moved to subpoena Singham to testify before the House Oversight Committee, emphasizing that if Singham doesn't comply, lawmakers will hold him in contempt.
What we've uncovered is I feel like the tip of the iceberg still, and so there's a lot more work to be done, and then bring the swift arm of justice behind it.
The committee will probe the links between Singham and the CCP. When she made the motion to subpoena Singham on Wednesday, the top Democrat on the committee urged his side of the aisle to support it.
I understand these concerns. I'm going to recommend that we vote yes on the Luna motion.
The pro-Beijing billionaire has been under the microscope for several months. The Oversight Committee opened their investigation into Singham last summer, and former Senator Marco Rubio previously referred him to the DOJ. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
President Trump with 3 major announcements on Venezuela. This coming as top oil executives are about to meet President Trump and administration officials at the White House. Stay tuned for more news after this break.
What if kids in America didn't have to go to bed hungry tonight? What if our moms, dads, and grandparents could put healthy food on the table every day to help us grow strong? What if all of our friends and neighbors had fresh food too, and there was no hunger at all in America? And what if there was a way today for you to help? Call now or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day. So many of us don't have enough food to eat, but your monthly gift means families across the country and in your community can fill plates with food. Kids can get healthy meals year-round, even when school's out, and our neighbors can have fresh food. Food that moms, dads, entire families need to thrive. But right now, more people are facing hunger. Feeding America works from coast to coast with partner food banks, food pantries, and meal programs. It takes all of us to make that happen. Will you help too? Please call the number on your screen or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give just $19 a month, and we'll send you this free canvas grocery bag. It's our way of saying thank you for helping to end hunger for our neighbors. Because no kid, no mom or dad, nobody should go hungry in America. Nobody. So what if today was the day you could help nourish futures for our friends, our families, for all of us? Ending hunger is possible. What if we end it together? Call or give online today at helpfeedingamerica.org and your gift can be doubled. Thank you.
We said we'd never give in to a meltdown.
Okay.
And we'd never babysit with a screen. We said we'd never let the toys take over.
Mariella!
Never leave the house looking, well, and never let them out of our sight. Cars get hot fast, and kids can be at risk. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
President Trump about to host the top 14 oil companies at the White House. They plan to discuss returning to Venezuela following the capture of former dictator Nicolas Maduro. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent at the North Lawn of the White House, Mari Otsu. Mari, good afternoon. What can we expect from this meeting?
Don, good afternoon. That's right. The meeting was closed to press earlier in the morning, but just a few minutes ago they opened it up, so we'll get live updates from that soon. And this morning, a White House spokeswoman, Taylor Rogers, told us that we can expect American oil companies coming to the White House to discuss investment opportunities that will restore Venezuelan oil infrastructure. She says that the American people, the Venezuelan people, and energy companies will all benefit from these investments. And this is coming as U.S. forces earlier this morning boarded an oil tanker in the Caribbean Sea. That tanker was called the Olena, and it is now the fifth oil tanker that U.S. forces have either boarded or seized in the past month. And President Trump, weighing in on this meeting on Truth Social, says that the U.S. has now canceled the previously planned second wave of attacks on Venezuela, saying he thinks that they're no longer needed. But however, all ships will stay in place for safety and security purposes. He also says that at least $100 billion are expected to be invested in big oil. And here he is previewing the meeting last night. Take a look.
We're going to be right here in the White House. We're going to meet with the biggest oil people in the world. They're all coming here. The top 14 companies are coming here. They're going to go in. They're going to rebuild the whole oil infrastructure. They're going to spend at least $100 billion. And it's an unbelievable oil that they have and an unbelievable quality of oil and amount of oil.
When they nationalized the oil industry in Venezuela, going back to the 1920s, American companies had invested billions.
We built it.
All of it.
And then it was taken away from us.
Stolen.
It was stolen from us. And it was taken away, years ago over a period of time, but it was taken away in the early 2000s, even beyond that, but the early 2000s. And I just took it back.
This coming as President Trump this week made three big announcements concerning Venezuela in the wake of the capture of former Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. The first announcement is that Venezuela would turn over 30 to 50 million barrels of sanctioned oil to the U.S., and the U.S. will then sell that at market price for both the benefit of the American people and the Venezuelan people. And then Venezuela, with those profits, will buy only American-made products. And then the third announcement is that Venezuela has agreed to release all political prisoners. Here's Energy Secretary Chris Wright saying what he thinks it'll take to rebuild the oil infrastructure in Venezuela. Take a look.
Look, for 25 years, we've seen the collapse of the Venezuelan regime. Everything going the wrong direction, a totalitarian socialist dictatorship. And guess what? We've got wildly different leverage now. We've got a Venezuelan government that wants to work with the United States, that wants to try to end the corruption and snuff out all the problems in their country. Or at least they're going to work constructively with us, because that's the only way they get oil revenue. But I have been deluged with companies interested to go to Venezuela. So this is really going to be just President Trump changing the conditions so businesses want to go back in for business reasons. They want to go back. Thousands of Venezuelans in the United States and around the world work for these companies. They're thrilled at the prospect to be able to go back home to their country and help drive change there and help get the energy industry going again.
And President Trump today announcing that he'll be meeting with Colombia's Gustavo Petro in the first week of February at the White House. He also warns that cocaine and other drugs must be stopped from coming into the U.S. And last night, President Trump said that he'll be meeting with the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Machado, in the next week. Machado said this week that she wants to give President Trump her Nobel Peace Prize for liberating her country. Don, back to you.
All right, Mari, thank you. U.S. payrolls climbed less than expected in December. The economy added 50,000 new jobs last month. We have analysis coming up after this break.
Whispered across generations, a hidden secret unveils the essence of longevity and vitality. A timeless legend regarding energy and wonder. Rooted in ancient health wisdom, we proudly introduce Pure Tang Black Ginseng, a 100% natural organic energy drink made from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng. It takes 2,260 days and nights from seed to growth, undergoing a meticulous 9-step process of steaming and drying. Black ginseng reaches its full potency, enriched with ginsenoside RG3 and enhanced absorption efficiency. No sugar, no caffeine, no artificial ingredients. Experience the pure natural power of Pure Tang Black Ginseng. Nourish your body, strengthen your immunity, and boost your energy. To order Pure Tang Black Ginseng, please visit puretang.com.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. You may know me from my many years on television. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I felt this slight pressure on my chest, just slight. I thought, oh, it's nothing, it'll go away. I didn't get it. I did not get it. But a few days later, while shopping at a boutique, that pressure returned, much stronger. It felt like an elephant pressing on my chest. I had a 90% blockage in my main artery and a 75% blockage in the adjacent artery. I was rushed into surgery where I received 2 stents in my arteries. Stents developed through research funded by the American Heart Association. Those stents saved my life. That's why I'm in front of you today, asking you to join me in supporting the American Heart Association by becoming a monthly donor. Call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough. Get the next person trained in CPR, the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. I'm so grateful to the American Heart Association. Their research helped save my life. I can enjoy life with my children, my grandchildren, and my friends. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, and your support now can help save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt that you can wear to show that you are helping save lives. Please, listen to your heart. The only reason I'm here today is because I did. So please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now. Join me as a monthly donor today and help save even more lives. Thank you.
We now have access to new footage showing a different perspective of the Minnesota ICE shooting. It appears to show the federal agent being hit by Renee Nicole Good's car. Let's take a look.
Every morning, just so you know. It'll be the same plate when you come talk to us later. That's fine. U.S. citizen. You want to come at us? You want to come at us? I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead. Out of the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Oh!
The video obtained by Alpha News appears to show the perspective of the ICE agent involved in the shooting. The news agency said this is a cell phone video filmed in the moments leading up to the shooting. Vice President J.D. Vance and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt both shared the footage. They said this proves the ICE officer was acting in self-defense. Other videos of the shooting posted to social media showed the agent holding a cell phone in the moments leading up to the shooting. And according to a report by the New York Post, Good was involved with a local anti-ICE activist coalition known as ICE Watch. Local authorities are asking residents who witnessed the incident to submit video footage. And the Supreme Court will not issue a ruling today on a challenge to President Trump's authority to impose tariffs. The High Court heard arguments in November. Trump imposed tariffs by invoking the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The president says the tariffs are necessary to address what he has described as a national emergency regarding U.S. trade deficits. Trump has imposed tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico, citing the trafficking of fentanyl and illicit drugs into the United States. Trump has also imposed reciprocal tariffs on goods imported from other nations that trade with the U.S. Businesses impacted by the tariffs and 12 states brought the challenges. The U.S. economy added about 50,000 jobs last month. That's the estimate released today by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's down from 64,000 jobs that were added in November. The number also falls short of the 55,000 new jobs economists were expecting. The report also reflects a job market that is stable enough to give investors hope the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates this year. The BLS also reported an unemployment rate of 4.4%, down from November's four-year high of 4.6%. The director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, commented on the new figures on Fox News this morning.
You look at the labor market, it's very strong. It surprised on the upside 3 out of the last 4 months. This one was about at expectation. And if you look at the underlying fundamentals, the unemployment rate went down. And you know they do two-digit rounding. It was actually like down almost 2% if they weren't rounding. And the bottom line is the thing we care most about for the future of the labor market is what's happening to wage growth. Yep. And if you look at the wage growth for this year, manufacturing wages, for example, were up $3,000 per worker. And so that's the kind of thing that marks a healthy labor market. You know, under Obama and Biden, there was basically no real wage growth.
The new jobs report today shows the U.S. economy seeing modest gains in the number of jobs. Meanwhile, President Trump announced a purchase of $200 billion in mortgage bonds to lower loan rates. Joining us to discuss is Joseph Trevisani, economic and currency analyst at FX Street. Joseph, good afternoon. Hope you're doing well so far in the new year. So jobs increased by 50,000, and this was below forecasts. Is the labor market stalling?
I think the labor market is reasonably solid. By the way, good afternoon, Don. Nice to see you in the new year. I think it's reasonably solid. It's not producing a great number of jobs, as in the numbers out of the Labor Department. But do remember what we have here. They have revamped their way of calculating jobs, and so it's a different ball game now without the input of what used to be called the birth-death model. So it looks to be still a pretty reasonably solid job market.
What do you think is contributing to perhaps constrained job creation? Because during the Biden administration, you remember this, we were often getting monthly numbers of over 100,000.
Right. And a lot of those numbers in the Biden administration were later revised away, which was the problem with using the birth-death model that the Labor Department uses or used to use to classify and to estimate jobs that are created in the month. So it's hard to say exactly what is behind you're not getting the type of 100,000, 150,000 jobs that you were getting. As I said, part of that is a revision of the way they're calculating jobs. Part of it, I think, is probably also uncertainty about where the economy is going to go.
What about tariffs? How do tariffs play into this equation? Is it having an impact that's leading to lower hiring?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think it really is yet, and I don't anticipate that it's going to. When the tariffs were first started, and as an economic policy back last year in April and May, there was a great deal of speculation in the economic community and the forecasting community that this would be a huge hit to jobs and it would be a huge boost to inflation. Neither has happened. I thought at the time, and I still do, that the threat to inflation, which could eventually turn into a threat to jobs, was overstated because manufacturers and retailers will absorb and did absorb much of the increases to maintain their market share. So that particular problem hasn't occurred. Will the tariffs achieve their stated goal of revitalizing U.S. manufacturing, which would, of course, mean more jobs, has yet to be seen.
So, Joseph, I don't think you would classify this as extraordinarily strong job growth. So if that is the case, I want to ask you, can the economy grow without such growth?
Yes, I think it can, because what you're looking at, remember, behind these job numbers that we've seen, and if you look at the last three job numbers, they're actually flat because the prior 3 months ago was down 105,000. So the last three jobs numbers are flat. But if you look behind that, you look at a GDP that in the last 3 quarters is growing. If you take the Atlanta Fed's GDP estimate for the fourth quarter of 5.1%, their latest one, at a 4.4% rate in the last 3 quarters. That's the second, the third, and the fourth quarters of last year. With that kind of GDP growth, it is very difficult not to expect a much stronger job market in this year. I would say 100, 150,000, 200, many more jobs once the economy gets sorted out as to what is actually happening and where the growth is occurring.
Okay, well, keep a close watch on that. But I want to move on to President Trump announcing a purchase of $200 billion in mortgage bonds. And of course, you know, the goal is to reduce mortgage rates, lower monthly payments, make it more affordable to buy a home. How much of a difference do you think that's going to make in actually lowering mortgage rates?
Well, it will. I mean, the 30-year mortgage, the 30-year average, or the 30-year mortgage dropped 22 points today. That's a pretty substantial amount for a one-day move. It's now below 6%. I think mortgage rates, the two things that go into, of course, housing purchases are jobs, which are stable and steady, and interest rates, mortgage rates specifically. If you look at the numbers over the past 5 years, the number of home purchases, existing home sales, has dropped almost 40% from the fourth quarter of 2020. And the large portion of that is the rise in interest rates that attended the inflation that we saw throughout the middle and later part of the Biden administration. So I think, yes, two things are true here. One, the market now senses what the direction is. I don't think the Fed is going to intervene in the markets to the same degree that it did in COVID, where it bought like 500 billion and more, and over $1 trillion in total of MBS paper. I don't think that's going to happen, but it certainly is the direction markets are going. And if the Fed moves a little bit more on lowering the Fed funds rate, I think market rates and interest rates will follow.
Okay, so what are the core reasons that mortgage rates are higher now than before? And do you think that President Trump will have to, continually purchasing these bonds in order to keep the rates sustained at a lower rate?
Well, it's an interesting question. Will President Trump continue to berate the federal authorities and the Fed about what he wants for his policy? Yes, I think he probably will. That is Mr. Trump's way of doing business. I think the greatest impact on the decline in home sales, particularly existing home sales, has been the rise in interest rates. And they attended the inflation of the Biden administration from when we went up to 9% in total for the CPI. So I think that is the greatest impact. On top of that, you have a falling off of about 20% in the number of new homes started. New homes tend to be the homes that first-time buyers buy, that they contract for in a mortgage. That is the most sensitive, I think, sector for interest rates. In other words, new home buyers who have, of course, less money, less established credit, need lower interest rates more than established buyers. So the more you get interest rates down, the more that particular sector of the market, of the housing market, I think, will expand. Once there are buyers online, then you get builders online, then you get new home starts. So I do think that interest rates going down, headed lower, both by the Fed's pressure and, if you want, by jawboning from President Trump, will impact and will improve the housing market.
Okay, just finally, two things here. One is, do you think if President Trump stops buying these bonds, that rates will go back up? And the second thing is, what is the impact on affordability if large investors are barred from purchasing more single-family homes, which President Trump said he's taking steps to do this?
Yes, I don't think if the Fed stops No one in the market is expecting the Fed to start a massive MBS buying program or loan buying program to drive rates lower. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's in the cards. I don't think anybody expects it. So if the Fed buys $200 billion of MBS and then doesn't buy any more, I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference in the overall interest rates and the 30-year mortgage. That will go up and down with what rates are doing in general. If the federal authorities ban, as you say, investment in houses by corporations, then yes, that will free up, it will take some of the pressure from the housing market. Because after all, why is a large corporation or a private equity company buying homes? Well, they're buying it because they expect prices to go up. They're not going to live in the homes. So if that is limited, yes, it will leave more homes available for the retail buyer and take some pressure from prices. Because if you look at the median home price, it's almost 50% in the past, I think, since COVID. That is a very high increase and makes it difficult for retail buyers, especially new buyers, first-time buyers, to get into the housing market.
Okay, Joseph, it's always good to speak with you. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me on. Have a good afternoon.
You as well. General Motors says it will take a $6 billion charge as it scales back parts of its electric vehicle strategy. The car maker cites weaker demand and changes in federal policy. GM said the charge reflects a reassessment of EV production plans in North America as consumer interest cooled and government incentives declined. Around $2 billion of the charge is tied to non-cash write-downs. The remaining $4 billion covers supplier settlements and canceled investments. GM said it became the second largest EV seller in North America in late 2024, but demand slowed in 2025 after tax credits were eliminated and emissions rules eased. The automaker has since shifted some factories back to gasoline-powered vehicles and reduced battery investments. Drug prices are moving in a favorable direction for patients. Johnson & Johnson said yesterday it struck a deal with the Trump administration to lower drug prices in exchange for tariff relief. The company says it will participate in the Trump RX platform to allow Americans to buy its medicines at significantly discounted rates. It will also provide Medicaid program access at prices comparable to those in other developed nations. U.S. patients currently pay far more for prescription medications, often nearly 3 times more than in other developed nations. Johnson & Johnson says it's proud to be answering President Trump's call to lower drug prices for Americans.
Brutal.
While at the same time also ensuring the U.S. continues to lead the world in healthcare innovation. Last December, Trump unveiled new details with 9 major pharmaceutical companies to reduce prices for drugs for Americans. NASA is bringing an astronaut and 3 crewmates back to Earth months earlier than planned after a crew member's serious medical condition. More news after this break.
So at the age of 5, I was sexually molested. I had my first child at the age of 15 and became homeless at the age of 16. The scariest part about not having a place to live was having a child and not having a place to live and not knowing where our meal was going to come from and where we're going to sleep. To be homeless as a teen, I didn't ask for that.
No young person should ever have to worry about having a safe place to sleep at night, or a warm meal to eat, or whether anyone cares about them. 1 in 10 young adults will experience a form of homelessness this year, and that's unacceptable. But the good news is there is an organization making a big difference, Covenant House.
Call or go online now. For a gift of only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love to more than 2,000 young people who sleep at a Covenant House every night.
For over 50 years, Covenant House has been helping youth in crisis.
It was pretty tough. But Covenant House really helped me and really helped mold me into the woman I am today.
Call or go online right now to safeplacetosleep.org with your gift of just $19 a month. With your monthly donation, you'll receive this soft, comforting blanket as a reminder of the warmth and safety your gift will provide a young person tonight.
I have no words to express how Covenant House changed my life. They gave me the love that I needed. They just really genuinely just wanted to help me succeed, and I'm succeeding.
Your $19 monthly gift is urgently needed to reach other young people who are facing unimaginable situations. Call or go online to safeplacetosleep.org.
Your support makes the work of Covenant House possible. Thank you for caring.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
Russia says it fired its hypersonic Oreshnik missile at Ukraine in retaliation for what it claims was a drone attack on President Vladimir Putin's residence. It's the second time Russia has fired the missile at Ukraine. Putin has claimed the Oreshnik missile is impossible to intercept because it is reported to travel at 10 times the speed of sound. Ukrainian officials also say overnight drone attacks killed 4 people, injured 19, and damaged residential areas in Kyiv. City officials say an emergency medic responding to the strikes is among the dead. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky has said an agreement on security guarantees with the United States was ready to be signed at the highest level. He added that discussions had also advanced on documents covering Ukraine's reconstruction and economic development. He also warned that Moscow was trying to exploit winter weather to attack Ukraine and reiterated calls for continued international support. An update on the deadly Swiss fire that killed 40 people on New Year's Eve. Swiss prosecutors today summoned the owners of the ski resort bar where the tragedy happened. The prosecutors are investigating the French owners on suspicion of crimes including homicide by negligence. The owners did not answer reporters' questions as they entered the prosecutor's office. The couple have said their grief over the fire and said they will cooperate fully with the investigation.
I'm just going to tell you what's happening with my clients on this day of national mourning. That's all I'm going to say. My client yesterday was able to speak to her mother on the phone for the first time. It was an incredibly powerful moment. Thank God she was able to. Her vocal cords have reactivated. We need to go see what's happening now, so I have to leave you now.
More than half of the 40 people killed in the blaze were teenagers, and a further 116 people were injured, many seriously. Prosecutors said last weekend that the legal criteria to detain the couple had so far not been met. Witnesses and prosecutors have said the blaze appeared to have been started by the use of sparkling candles that set foam soundproofing on the basement ceiling alight. Questions remain about oversight at the bar. The local mayor admitted this week that the venue had missed multiple safety checks. The presidents of France and Italy are expected to attend a ceremony today in a nearby town to mark the tragedy and remember the victims. A serious medical condition with a crew member aboard the International Space Station has led NASA to bring the astronaut and 3 crewmates back to Earth months earlier than planned. This is the first such emergency returning to the orbiting laboratory's 25-year history. Here's the story.
It's in the best interest of our astronauts to return Crew 11 ahead of their planned departure.
NASA is bringing the 4-astronaut team Crew 11 back from the International Space Station due to one member's serious medical issue. A senior NASA official said that it was the first time in the ISS's 25-year history that a mission ended early due to a medical issue. Jared Isaacman is NASA's administrator.
As we mentioned before, obviously this was a serious medical condition. That is why we're pursuing this path. Crew member is stable, as we mentioned. We're not electing an emergency deorbit.
NASA officials did not name the affected crew member, citing privacy. The issue led NASA to cancel a planned spacewalk scheduled for Thursday. NASA's Chief Medical Officer James Polk provided more details on the issue.
Once again, this is not an operational issue. This is not an injury that occurred in the pursuit of operations, if that was the question. But unrelated to the operational environment that we have right now. It's mostly having a medical issue in the difficult areas of microgravity. And with the suite of hardware that we have at our avail to complete a diagnosis.
Crew 11 arrived at the ISS after launching from Florida in August 2025 and were originally due to return around May this year. Astronauts rarely acknowledge or describe their medical conditions publicly. In the past, NASA has cancelled spacewalks for medical reasons, such as spacesuit discomfort in 2024 and a pinched nerve in 2021.
2026 is set to be a big year for outer space. NASA, Europe's space agency, and people here on Earth are gearing up for a range of new missions this year. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more from the moon to Mars.
Moon missions, solar eclipses, Mars. This year will be a big one for space. At NASA, the Artemis program is aiming to send humans around the moon, the first manned lunar mission since the Apollo era. But instead of putting astronauts back on the moon, Artemis 2 will send 4 astronauts on a lunar flyby. NASA says the mission will launch no later than April. In addition to space missions, 2026 will see 2 solar eclipses. A ring of fire will take place in February, but will only be visible in Antarctica. But on August 12th, a total solar eclipse will travel from the Arctic over Iceland and Greenland and into Spain. Viewers will get nearly 2.5 minutes of totality when the moon passes in front of the sun. Humans are also looking toward Mars. The European Space Agency's Hera mission will observe the red planet's moons. A lot to look forward to. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
President Trump says major U.S. oil companies have pledged $100 billion to revive Venezuela's oil sector. Trump will be meeting with top executives at the White House soon. We'll bring it to you live, so don't go away.